Welcome back to my channel, you guys. This is your internet wrestling champion here. And on today's video, I'm going to be going over 3 problems that I have with the WWE. So since the start of this year, I've noticed that a growing number of people online especially have had more and more issues with the WWE and the product that it's been putting out, and it's been for a veritable number of reasons. And today I just wanted to go over 3 issues that I have with the WWE and why I think it's bad for business and why it's been driving fan morale and support down for these last 6 months. So issue number 1 is inconsistent booking and rushed storytelling. So a legitimate gripe that a lot of us have is the rushed storytelling that WWE has been producing over the last year or so. A lot of us feel like there's no real substance in a lot of the storylines that are going on. A lot of them feel repetitive or outdone. And a lot of the times, I just feel like the conclusions are insignificant and meaningless. You know, there's no real payoff to a lot of these storylines. And some stories even just get dropped and never mentioned again for like months on end. I'll give you an example right now. The storyline between Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, 2 years. 2 years. I remember in the summer or the fall of 2023, they were hinting an Austin Theory face turn and a breakup between the two. And guess what? It's nearly the fall of 2025. It is literally the summer of 2025. So at the minimum 2 years later, they're still teasing it. And for 6 months, I don't believe we've seen Austin Theory in a match on Monday Night Raw for a solid 6 months, up until a few weeks ago when he went one-on-one with a returning Sheamus, who, by the way, took about a 6 to 12 month hiatus due to injury. So how is somebody on the active roster on Raw who's new to the game as infrequently featured on Raw as a man who is a veteran and on a part-time schedule due to recovery? How does that make sense? I'll give you one more example. And I hate to bring it up because he is my favorite wrestler, but John Cena's heel run has been so lackluster. I would say it is the antithesis of his heel turn itself. Mind you, me and my brother, we were there live when we saw it, you know? Like, it was one of the most surreal things and one of the greatest things I've had the privilege of witnessing in front of my eyes live, you know? It was such a fever dream to watch, and it's something I'll never forget. But every appearance he's made since then for a large portion of the fan base has been forgettable and disappointing. And a large contributor for that disappointment would be the biggest example I have for this gripe. It's The Rock. He came out of nowhere, completely dropped the storyline from last year, him being in bad favor with Cody, and then started being all goody-goody from the start of Raw on Netflix. And then a month later comes back and starts this whole sell your soul storyline, only to disappear after John Cena seemingly sells his soul. So he drops last year's storyline, one of the best storylines I've ever seen, and then comes back a year later to start a new storyline, only to drop that story and then disappear for about 4 months. So let that sink in. He dropped 2 major plot lines in 12 months and disappeared for nearly a quarter of a year after that. Honestly, that's the biggest example I could give you guys. If you're looking for an example of inconsistent booking and rushed storytelling, that right there takes the cake because it can't get any worse than that. That's a good way to segue into my second issue that I have with the WWE, which is poor character development and the over-reliance of part-time talent. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm always happy to see somebody like Randy Orton or John Cena or Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar even. I mean, obviously we haven't seen him in a couple years, but you know what I mean. I'm never frowning when I see these guys on the screen. It's always great to see them. It's just, it rubs me the wrong way once you realize it's coming at the expense of these guys who have worked their asses off to get to the WWE and are on the road 300 days out of the year. You know, they don't see their family for 300 days out of the year, and they're scraping to get by, and they don't even get screen time, while these guys can go off for whatever amount of time, come back, get paid magnitudes more than the full-time talent, and get more screen time than these guys could ever have hoped to get that year. The number of times that they have done this on like rotation over the last few years, it almost borders on unethical for me, because as a company, or rather as a fan of this company, what does that tell you as a fan? How do they really view their full-time employees, and where are their priorities at? Are they trying to develop talent for the future really, or are they trying to create singular moments that they can cash out on? What's really the priority for the WWE? And you have to question this when you see stuff like this happen enough times where it's not just a coincidence, it's a pattern. Speaking of patterns, and speaking of the devil, man, I'm going to have to use him as an example here again. But look at The Rock in the WrestleMania 40 build-up. You know, it was very clear what was going to happen. We had a workhorse in Cody Rhodes who was busting his ass for 2 years since returning. You know, he was the face of the company. He carried majority of the most popular storylines that fans would invest in. And then when he won the Royal Rumble, the very next week, or the same week, he just gave it up without any explanation. And it was very, very clearly because The Rock had just weaseled his way into the title picture through some boardroom politics, you know? And I want to believe that they planned all of it out. They knew that the fans would be outraged. You know, I was of that belief for the first year. But as of late, it's becoming more and more clear that that just was not the case. You know, they did a great job in pivoting and building on that momentum and turning it into something great. Because the main event of WrestleMania 40 was one of the greatest things in the history of the WWE. You know, that's one of the best storylines ever. And like best main events, you know, it was just nuts to watch. But I cannot ignore that that was a recovery move, because on a whim, they decided to change plans and insert The Rock, who was a part-timer, into the picture for a spectacle, because they prioritized a payday over long-term booking and storytelling. And this is evident even today. If you look at as recently as WrestleMania 41, I'll give you two scenarios or examples. The first one, they just randomly booted Bayley from the women's championship match, the tag championship match, and then inserted Becky Lynch in there. It seemed like a split-second decision, on-the-spot decision, and yeah, it's helped bring Lyra to life as a character, but I feel like it kind of snubbed Bayley, and she's been a legitimate workhorse in this division since day one. She's a legitimate all-star player, and for some reason, they just discarded her from the main card of WrestleMania for a moment. And like as nice as it was to see Becky back, I think she deserved a more fleshed out return, and Bayley just deserved a better treatment than that, right? That was ridiculous. And a second example with Joe Henry, again, I believe in Joe Henry. I love his character. It's just, why did they have to insert him into that match when they could have had a returning Aleister Black, you know? And he didn't have to win the match. Joe lost the match. I don't think he lost any credibility there. I think he only gained credibility. So why not have Aleister Black come? He damn well deserves it just as much as Joe Henry, right? Why did they do that? I can only imagine what kind of precedents it sets for the people backstage, and what kind of morale these full-time talents have that, like, behind the scenes, you know? How do you think it feels for look at Karrion Kross, Jesus Christ. This man is a legend in the making, you know? I genuinely believe this guy is a future main eventer along the likes of Braun Breaker and your Bronson Reeds and your Fatus. He's up there, but for some reason he's being relegated to post-show talk shows, or having to, and I don't want to say he's relegated for this one, because I do believe indie shows have merit, but why is he performing at independent shows outside of the WWE in Las Vegas on the weekend of WrestleMania while it's in Las Vegas? By the way, Las Vegas is his hometown. Why? So the third problem I have is just the oversaturation of content. You know, there's just too many shows that the WWE is putting out in a single week. I'm pretty sure watching WWE now is akin to having a part-time job. You know, in fact, I can guarantee you that it is kind of like having a part-time job, because I'll tell you what, on the weekend of WrestleMania, I was consuming probably like 15 hours of wrestling at the least, you know? There's the SmackDown before WrestleMania, then the WrestleMania pre-show, then WrestleMania Night 1, then WrestleMania Night 1 post-show, then the WrestleMania Night 2 pre-show, then the WrestleMania Night 2, and onwards and so on. You know what I mean? It's just exhausting. And when you're putting all this content out in such a short amount of time and it's steadily declining in quality, then what reason do fans have to invest their time and energy so much so in a single week, every single week for your product? Like, what reason do I have to invest this much energy and time into your product as a fan if all the stories or the majority of them are coming across as lazy? You have a 2 to 3 hour show in Raw every Monday, and then a 3 hour show every Friday on SmackDown. You know, between 6 hours every week, I think maybe a total of an hour and a half of it, maybe 2 hours on a good week, and that's a good week, is product of substance, something that I can sink my teeth into. And that is just criminal. Why is 1/3 of your product the only thing that people are tuning in for? Why are 2/3 of your product, that's nearly 70% of your runtime throughout the week, why are people tuned out during that time? Like, what the hell is going on? And this isn't even insulting just for the fans at home. This is especially insulting for everybody that pays money to come to these shows. You know, people are taking time out of work. People are slaving away at work. You know, their hard-earned money is going into this. And trust me, I go every time they come to Toronto. These tickets aren't cheap. Their cheapest tickets are around $200, you know? I don't know what kind of money you're making for $200 to be considered cheap, but I'm not making that kind of money, and neither is majority of the people in Canada, you know, or anybody around the world. I don't think $200 is cheap anywhere. No one, shit. But yeah, man, like, I think it's incredibly insulting for the fans that are dedicated, who bring their families out, people who grew up with this company and then are trying to get their kids into this and come to these shows with their kids. It's just not the same product as it was when we were growing up. Like, what does that say? What does that say about the WWE's feelings and regards towards the fans that commit time, energy, and finances to their shows? It's insulting in my mind, you know? And for me, I've had the fortune of having good shows every time I go there. I have the fortune also at home to turn the TV off and go do something else for like 20 minutes at a time whenever it's a lazy program on, right? These people don't have that luxury. Where are they gonna go? To the washroom and sit down for 20 minutes? That's ridiculous. Imagine that though. Imagine you put 10 hours of something out every week and only 2 of those hours are met with any positive reception. You would think that one would feel inclined to improve the quality of their work so that all 10 hours work, or they would cut down the amount of hours to something like 2 to 4, you know? But they haven't done either of that. They haven't demonstrated the willingness to adapt and listen to the criticism, which, if I were to add a bonus point, it would be that, right? Triple H dismisses the fans' criticism, and he does it so freaking vagrantly online. And it's so insulting to the intelligence and the integrity of the fans. I get it. There's some internet wrestling fans that just like to complain. I get it, you know, but we're smart enough to tune those guys out. You would think someone like Hunter would know how to discern the negative Nancy's from the legitimate fans that have something to say. But it doesn't seem like he does. It seems like he's too lost in the sauce. And it just seems like he's trying to capitalize as much as he can, and they're just pumping out content as much as they can. And the same effect that happens to people on social media will happen here. The product is going to look over manufactured. The people involved are going to look inhuman. They're going to have overly manufactured personalities, unrealistic mannerisms. It's already being seen in Jey Uso. He used to be very human in his promos, and that's what I loved the most about his character. He was very genuine, but now he's just a walking billboard for WWE and a catchphrase. And that's what happens when you have to constantly push content out. You leave no room for authenticity and creativity, and that is the consequence of consistent content. And that's what's happening right now. And it's surely going to continue until these people learn to listen to criticism and lessen the amount of product that they're pushing out. So anyways, guys, that is my video for today. Those are my 3 biggest issues with the WWE. And let me know in the comment section down below what your issues with the company are. I would love to get to know your opinions. I know I can't cover everybody in just 15 minutes. So I'd love to get to hear what you think they need to fix. So leave a like, leave a comment. This has been your Internet Wrestling Champion. And until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day.